This is to demonstrate my new procedural track for Trainz a new era and Trainz 2019 and above. It won't work for earlier versions of Trainz because it's based upon and utilizing the new kind procedural track which was introduced with Trainz a new era. So here we have some of the track in place, and you can see here that it's creating the correct frogs and point blades and check rails and wing rails. Now what it's not doing is, as we know with procedural track, it's not handling the diamond crossing in any particular way at all, and so that we're left with that sort of bodge there. You'll also notice that with the broad gauge track there are quite a few variations to standard gauge. If we just nip over here to some standard gauge track, you'll see here how the sleepers are all nicely neatly extended and the angles are correct. Well, for the broad gauge track it was quite difficult to achieve anything remotely like that. I think this is my best example here, and you will find that you will need to experiment to get the best looking junctions. So let's go over to the track. Here it is here. That's me, Great Western Railway broad gauge Trainz a new era procedural track. I know it's long-winded, but you know, what else am I going to call it? So let's go to let's jump out of here a bit. Where are we? Here's some space. So it lays pretty much like any other type of track spline, and you can see here what I've done is I've actually I'm using the sleeper that's recreating the cross timber in longitudinal track. Brunel's longitudinal track, if you've seen my video on YouTube, was designed to support the wrought iron bridge rails that were available at the time, and so he was working within existing technology. Brunel, of course, loved to push technology to its absolute limits, but this was pretty much, he had to create a stable permanent way for the Great Western Railway. So what he did is he decided he would support the bridge rail with longitudinal timbers running this way, and that these were just to maintain the gauge. Now the competition to this isn't the type of traditional modern sleepered track like here that we're used to. This didn't really exist in this format at the time. The competition to Brunel's Bulk Road, as it's known, B-A-U-L-K, Bulk Road, were stone blocks and iron rails, which is just stone blocks, quite obviously, with holes drilled in them, with wooden pegs driven in, and then short lengths, yard lengths or a little bit longer, of cast iron rails, very brittle. Even when we went to wrought iron, it was still pretty brittle. So this was quite an innovation. Now to do this, I've had to, as it were, backtrack the excellent N3V procedural track. In other words, they've reproduced the technology of today, and I've now had to reduce that to the technology of yesterday. So the way I've done this is this is my own sleeper mesh, and you can see it's set to more or less the correct spacing. It's perhaps a little bit even longer spacing than that in Brunel's track, but I'm happy enough that I think it creates the look. The longitudinal bulks are actually part of the chair, left and right chair file, and so the sleeper file and the chair files, those two components together with the track file, those are my contributions plus my mesh library. And then the rails themselves, I did have a go at making bridge rails and see if I could get them to work in the procedural track, but it just didn't happen. I had thought I was going to be able to get away with it, but it just didn't work properly. So in the end, I just decided, well look, I want procedural track, so that's it. That's as much as I'm going to do. So this is actually flatbed rail. Most of that rail is buried into the longitudinal bulk road. Frankly, I mean, you'd have to be an absolute purist to worry too much about that. Anyway, this is the best I can do, and if anybody can produce a better one, let me know, because I'll download it and use it. Anyway, here we go. So let's make a junction. Oh. How do we make a junction? Just delete that. There we go. And now the first thing, straighten up the foot end of the junction. First thing, let's see where the problems are. Well, here we don't have a problem at all. It actually looks pretty good. Look at that. That's not bad spacing. That's done a lovely job. That varies though, because what you can do is you can get this stacking of the cross timbers at all ends, indeed, of the junction, at the foot end and at the top ends up here. So if we insert another track spline, that's that one, isn't it? Insert a spline point. We'll see what that does. Well, you can see there immediately. Let's straighten that. Unstraightened it. That we're going to have problems here. So what you do have to do is, and I mean, I did play around with this for a lot to try and get it sorted. You really just have to hit on a compromise. What you're prepared to compromise with, and that's a reasonable compromise, I think, of a junction. You've got a few extra cross timbers in there, but hey, who's to say that they didn't? And believe me, this is after a couple of weeks of absolute hair tearing trying to get this to work. So let's have a look in, just make sure we can change. There they go. But it's lovely, isn't it, that you can actually make a track with nice looking junctions with the frogs and check rails and everything all appearing magically. I really think it's a tremendous step forward in Trainz, because the track was always something I was a bit, well, I wouldn't say sniffy about, but certainly I was never brilliantly happy with it as it was. You know, those sort of junctions that you got, not too pleased with them. I think and here what I'm trying to do is just try and blow its brains a bit. But there you go. I mean, this is this kind procedural track. The work has really gone into this, and I'm really impressed. And clearly this, where am I? This junction here is too close. There we are. Let's move it away a bit. And depending on how you adjust this, these cross bolts do reduce in number. So there we are. Very nice. I like that. Now what else have I done? Well, I've also brought in, I've made a double track, where are we? A double track piece. Here we are. So let's just turn that 90 degrees. Oops. 3, 2, 1, not, 89, 90, there we are. Now what this is a piece of fixed track. It's only about 10 foot long, and I've stuck a cross bulk in the middle of it. But if you then go to the, well, not the San Marino tunnel portal, but if we go and we put in some bulk road track, procedural track, oh, come on. Anyway, oh, no, holding that down, I'm holding the shift key down quite incorrectly. There we go. Now what you do get here is you do get a bit of stacking of the cross timbers. Oops, there we are. But again, what I found is it's all to do with the spline points. So if you are prepared to do a bit of jiggering with the, that's a bit too much. How are we doing there? Yeah, you see, you can lose those a bit, and that's a bit of fixed track, look, which is holding the gauge. Now the gauge, or rather the gauge of the track, of course, is 7 foot, and in between, the space in between, and this causes a real problem when I was making fixed track junctions for this, for the old spline track. You know, I had a lot of trouble just doing a crossover. So to get that, now that is the correct GWR spacing, and you can see actually the distance between the two up and down roads is actually less than the gap between the rails, because that's the 6 foot as it is to this day, and that's 7 foot gauge. So happy days. So you may want to do that. I put it in because, you know, if you're a purist and you want to really experiment, by all means do. I would love to see it. What I will do is, and I haven't tried this before myself because I've only just been finally sorting this, sorting out this track. It's been a real chewing the carpet process, and I must, as I've put in the config, but I want to thank Teddy Toot. That's John. You know who you are. Because he really, I mean, you know, I was all ready to just chuck this away and give up, but he really put me straight by doing the really good ideas, coming up with some really good ideas, and straightforward, looking at it with fresh eyes and putting me straight. Oh, that's not too bad. As a crossover, it's perhaps a little bit sharp. That's not too bad, is it? Oh, that's better than I thought. Double junctions are always a nuisance. Let's go over to one of the double junctions. Yeah, I've got one here, and there's I forget what the logo is. A red star, right? without a tender. Oh, well. Oh no, it's tank logo. Yeah, so there's a double junction, and as I mentioned, that's the problem here. And also, if I'd have fiddled around with this, I could reduce the number of those cross ties that appear to make it absolutely more accurate. But to be honest, I don't think it's that big an issue. I mean, there's a lovely one. Just managed to position it. There's a few down there. What about over here? Oh, these are where I was trying out the double track gauge, and you sometimes do get a stack, an extra one or two of those tie bars going in. But anyway, I think it's it's ready for release, and that's what I'm doing. So here we are. I'm not going to make any, as I've said on my website, I did start making experiments making this type of crossover here, but I abandoned it after I realised that although I could do a straight track there, if I did a straight track there it wouldn't work, because that's actually, as you can see, on a slight curve, and that meant I would have to do variants with slight different varying curves according to the radii of the curves, the radius of the curve, the radii of the curves, to put it in the plural. And frankly, you know, I want to do other things, so I'm prepared to go with that. This is the big development as far as I'm concerned. So there we are. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you download the procedural track. I hope it works, because I've had all sorts of fun with it not working, or working okay on mine, but when my beta testers, Tom Stedman and John, checked it out with my bridge rails, it didn't work properly, didn't create proper. So that's why I went back to the N3V track rails. So I'm hoping it all works for everybody. I've got Trainz 2019. I haven't tried it out on that yet. I've just downloaded and installed that. It's a completely fresh installation, so I'm not going to muck about with that just yet, but I will try it out in the future. And well, what next from this? Well, the next is John and I, Teddy Toot and I, are going to experiment with mixed gauge. Now, we tried this in the past. Oh boy, have we tried this in the past, and the only solution that we can see is that it's like having two tracks, one stacked on top of the other, which would actually mean that you could have two trains on the same bit of track and they would ghost through each other. There are a number of fixes, which, I mean, that's what John's looking at, but I will now experiment with some sort of mixed gauge variant of this. And but it will be it will be quite an assembly job for anybody who wants mixed gauge. But then if you want it, you know, if you want it enough, you spend the time doing it. So there we are. Anyway, broad gauge, Brunel's brilliant 7-foot gauge bulk road, longitudinal timber bulk road for Trainz as procedural track at last. This replaces all of the fixed track junctions. It replaces my old spline. It replaces everything in one simple little model. Well, fairly simple little model, and the track gauge, the double track gauge, if you want to use that, but frankly it's absolutely up to you. It's only for the absolute purists, I would have thought, because visually I think you need that a little bit wider, but I thought I would follow exactly Brunel's position. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe. Always please subscribe. ING for Trainz. It doesn't cost you anything. I don't know who you are, but it's nice to know that I've got a number of subscribers, and I think the most you get is a notification that I've posted a new video. It's up to you if you want to watch them or not. So there we are, and you'll be able to download this from my website in the next few days, and today is the 4th of May 2019. So by the end of next week, by about the 10th of May next week, it should be on my website. It won't be on the download station. I'm just not putting stuff on the download station, and so if you want my stuff, go to my website, and it's all free. It's all freeware. I don't charge for anything, and enjoy.